Good morning and half a day, ladies and gentlemen. This public hearing, confirmation hearing by the Committee on Guam U.S. Military Build-Up Infrastructure Transportation of Mina 34 na Liya sa Guam is hereby convened. On the agenda this morning are the appointments to the Guam Building Code Council, the appointment of Ms. Amanda M. Catherine as a general public member, Mr. Frank J. Pangilinan as a licensed real estate professional member, Mr. William D. Beery as a licensed general building contractor member, Mr. Thomas P. Camacho as a structural engineer member, and Robin May Valdez as a general public member. So all those who are in the audience, you can join us up front for your confirmation. And as we proceed to recognize these particular individuals who have come before the legislature for confirmation, I want to extend my appreciation to Vice Speaker Talai. Thank you very much, Madam Vice, for joining us this morning. Ms. Amanda, if I can ask you if you have any opening comments with regards to your appointment that you would like to provide members of the committee, then you may proceed. I'm sorry, can you please turn on the mic? Oh, sorry. My apologies. My main objective in joining this committee was to further my career field and my knowledge of what I do. So I've been in the construction industry for almost 10 years now. I felt that joining the Building Code Council would help further my knowledge and what I would like to pursue. Ms. Catherine, I know you mentioned that you work in the construction industry. Yes. You've worked there for approximately 10 years. In what particular area? I started in construction liens. I then moved on to plumbing, another company with plumbing, HVAC, and fire protection, and now I am strictly HVAC here at Aguon. Okay, and are you familiar with the existing building code requirements? I am familiarizing myself with Guam's building codes. Okay, thank you, Ms. Catherine, and thank you for accepting the nomination or the appointment by the governor to serve in this council. Mr. Pangilinan, please identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Good morning, Senator Aguon and Vice Speaker Talai. My name is Frank Pangilinan, and I'm the nominee for the membership to the Guam Building Code for the licensed real estate professional. Was nominated by the Guam Association of Realtors to represent the real estate industry in the Guam Code Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pangilinan. If we can proceed with Mr. Beery.
Good morning, Senators.
Good morning.
Bill Beery. I've been a resident of Guam since 1996. I'm a licensed general contractor here in Hawaii, and been a member of GCA for all of these years also. So I'm the representative from GCA for Guam Building Code Council, and based on my background in construction and permitting and issues with building code, that sort of thing, and so I've enjoyed the tenure so far. Interesting business. So, but yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beery, also for accepting the governor's appointment to serve in this particular council. Mr. Camacho, if you can identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, senators. My name is Thomas P. Camacho. I am a registered civil and structural engineer both on Guam and the CNMI. I've been practicing engineering for about 35 years. I've got a bachelor's and a master's degree in engineering. I'm here to represent the slot for structural engineers. I'm also the current president of the Guam Society of Professional Engineers. And I've been practicing on Guam since 1981, I believe. And it's been great. I'm here to serve the island. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camacho, and thank you again, Ms. Catherine, Mr. Beery, Mr. Pangilinan, Mr. Camacho, for accepting the appointment by the Chief Executive to be able to serve in this council. I guess one general question I would like to pose to all of you, because you will be impaneled shortly upon the confirmation of your appointments, is looking at the building code. And I know that Ms. Catherine has highlighted that, in fact, she's still familiarizing herself with some of the building code requirements. Looking at the building code, do you feel that there are any updates that need to be made and that should be made to be able to ensure the integrity of the buildings that are being constructed on island? And I ask that as a general question, especially with your structural engineering background, with your real estate background, and then also with your contractors, general contractors experience, and Ms. Catherine as an individual that has worked in the construction industry. So just knowing full well what the existing building code requirements are, do you feel that there are any components of the building code that may need to be revisited so that in fact they are updated? Yes, Mr. Camacho.
Yes, Senator, thank you. There are provisions for special inspections for buildings because we're in a very active seismic zone or earthquake zone, and we're subjected to tremendous typhoon winds, super typhoons. There's a strict requirement for inspections, and with that, you know, and pretty much every building on Guam would qualify for that type of inspection. However, imposing certain inspection requirements, very strict inspection requirements to residential construction, for example, may lead to a lot of costs. So that's one provision in the code that really needs to be focused on and looked at, and it's something that may not be necessary, or I'd say it's necessary, but we don't want to put the burden back onto the community, especially residential homes, for example, with respect to added costs. So, but we do have to ensure that there are inspections to ensure that the structures are built the way they are designed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Camacho, and I'm glad you highlighted that, because certainly our island is prone to some earthquakes occasionally, and we just had one a few days back. And then also with super typhoons that occasionally visit us, and we need to knock on wood because we've been blessed for the last 15 plus years. So I certainly appreciate that. And the reason why that question was posed is acknowledging that if in fact elsewhere, nationally or elsewhere where it's appropriate, these building codes are upgraded to a certain standard, that would really be your responsibility to be able to look at some of these updates and some of these upgrades and see if they would be applicable, site adaptable to Guam, because those are certainly aspects that we need to ensure that the integrity of all of our structures when it comes to safety of these buildings. Mr. Berry, you look like you would like to chime in.
Well, I don't know about changes, but the upgrades that we're looking at now, going from 2009 IBC to the 2018, and then trying to make sure that we kind of Guamanize the code, make sure it applies to Guam. A lot of the codes are for different parts of the country. We've worked very hard for a long time now on the Tropical Energy Code, for example, and that's hopefully coming back up again for approval. So, but no, I think the idea of updating our building codes locally with the IBC as it changes is very, very progressive and very good for Guam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berry, and that's why it all comes back to this Building Code Council, being able to acknowledge if anything comes down and any updates are applied elsewhere, if in fact they're applicable. And Mr. Berry, you used the word Guamanize. If we would like to Guamanize it and ensure that it is incorporated into our codes, certainly that's where this council would come into considering, reviewing those, and then proposing it to the legislative body. So those are excellent comments in regards to how we need to proceed forward. One other component that certainly is a concern on my end is direct compliance. I mean, we can have the best building code on island that's going to ensure the integrity of any structure, but it's really enforcement and compliance that we need to beef up, so to speak, especially in light of any anticipated expansion in our economy, any anticipated expansion or growth over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. Those are certainly considerations in terms of ensuring that the resources are in place. So from your perspective, reviewing the Guam Building Code requirements, and if you're aware of certain aspects of the building code or certain entities that are not necessarily ensuring full compliance, then I certainly would appreciate that because we need to continue to have laws in the books that are followed. Mr. Berry?
One of the good things that comes out of the IBC code program is previously the federal monies were available for training. So the fire department, the DPW, everybody got trained on the code, the 2009 code, and it looks like that's going to happen again. There'll be a training session for the 2018 and that sort of thing. So it's a good thing. We put a burden on DPW and the fire department for inspections for the compliance part, and the only way that works is if those individuals are trained, understanding the code. And so far it's been very good.
Absolutely. Training is certainly a major component, especially updating our codes from 2009 to 2018. Certainly all the additional changes have to be part of any training and development. Yes, Mr. Camacho.
Yeah, Senator, there's one important aspect of the code upgrade that is going to affect Guam, and that's the fact that the USGS, Geological Service, has upgraded the ground accelerations for Guam, meaning that they've done their analysis and they've done their research, and they determined that Guam is susceptible to larger earthquakes, which means the ground accelerations are increased almost twofold. So the effect of that will mean that some buildings need to be beefed up, stronger. With that comes additional costs. But it'll be up to the engineer to identify that and work with the clients to ensure that you have a safe building and you have the most efficient building. With regard to ensuring code compliance, I'd like to suggest, Senator, that maybe some of the focus is with respect to the government be placed with DPW. And that being said, having the legislature assist them with funding for proper training, proper certification, because a lot of burdens placed on them when questions do come up, and you need building officials in place and able to make decisions with respect to code compliance, and that's what this body also serves as an arm to assist the government with doing that. But giving DPW adequate funding for inspectors and adequate funding for training, I think will help ensure that we have a safe environment out there and compliance officers out there to ensure that the code is being followed. And it's also up to the private community, the community of professional engineers, to ensure that contractors are following the design intent of every building out there, particularly those buildings that are occupied by the public, for example, schools, hotels, and government buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. And it comes back to making sure that we have the proper personnel in place who are trained and developed so that ensure they can ensure enforcement and compliance. But I have to also say this much. We have DPW that is going to come before the body very shortly in regards to their budget request. But just last fiscal year 17 versus fiscal year 18, their budgetary request was $1.5 million less. So in certain instances, it really has to originate from the agency as to exactly what their needs are. Secondly, much of the budget process, when it's allocated to respective agencies, is lump sum. And the intent behind that from the legislative body is to ensure that these directors and these administrators have full flexibility to be able to move resources around and apply them where they see it's necessary. In addition to that, the chief executive, the governor of Guam, is also given a 15% transfer authority of all his budgetary agencies in terms of the funding. So there's sufficient mechanisms in place that this body so far continues to provide the executive branch. If they feel that we need an additional $50,000, $100,000 to take care of training and development so that the building code is properly enforced and compliance is in place, then certainly that's where some of the tools have been provided to the governor of Guam in terms of moving resources around. So I agree with you, giving them the budget that they need, but in the same token, it's requesting for the budget that they need, originating from the agency, and if not, then there are certain budgetary considerations in terms of flexibility, the governor's transfer authority to be able to move money around so that these are addressed. And then finally, there are some federal funds out there that these agencies, because it's a national building code requirement in most instances, that there may be federal funds out there that would be accessible to DPW as the forefront, the agency at the forefront of ensuring enforcement and compliance. So there are things that, as an executive branch, as DPW, as the enforcement arm of the government of Guam, that certainly they need to also take the initiative on. So I appreciate all your comments and everyone, and I'd like to open the floor to the Madam Vice Speaker. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much for being here this morning and for accepting the nominations to this board. I was anxious to be here this morning because I had not met all of you, but I know that what you're doing is a very important public service. You have to balance the safety of our community with, of course, costs, and I'm glad that you brought those up this morning, that there are costs, and sometimes these are prohibitive for new residences and of course, business. But I am happy to meet you this morning and to see that you're very responsible, and thank you for your continued service, Mr. Beery, and for all of your volunteering to do this. I know it's a volunteer basis, and I appreciate that, and that you're going to have to work hard because it's a technical, complicated process where you have to weigh the different interests. But I wanted to also say that I hope that you can all, you can continue, and that you all serve in this capacity with fairness. I think that's really what our community wants to see, is that when we do have regulations, that they are enforced fairly, and all that you can do to assist us, the government of Guam, in doing that, I appreciate. So please do not hesitate to let us know where we can improve that, the enforcement of what is necessary and the fair enforcement of what we have put into place. And I also wanted to just ask Ms. Amanda Catherine, if you're being appointed under a special category, and it says, member of the general public who is not a registered professional, licensed general building contractor, or licensed realtor, who shall be familiar with barrier-free architecture and aware of and sensitive to the requirements necessary to ensure public buildings are accessible to and usable by persons with disabilities. And so I want to especially thank you for this, because this is it's a huge responsibility. I think you're going to be the voice for all of those who need public buildings to be accessible. I mean, and we all do need that. I think even in this building, when we built it, we found that it was not as accessible as it could be. And I think part of it was because it was old, they were restoring an old building, but still, we had to even make changes after we moved in to make sure that it was more accessible. And even now, in this day and age, we are still seeing that many buildings are not accessible. And so I'm not sure if it's enforcement is not being done, or there are exceptions. I think those also exist, but you're going to be the voice for that, and I guess, I don't know, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So, as you all know, Guam's population is aging and it's growing. With that being said, the ADA requirements are constantly changing. So yes, you see things that do need to be changed, but it's a continuous flux. So you guys aren't hindering Guam, so to speak. It's just catching up because, like we've stated, our codes went from 2009 to 2018. So it will be enforcing the new standards and making sure it gets done. And it's going to take time. You're going to see lapses, but I'm looking forward to helping establish these new standards and codes and making sure that everyone has access to what they need. So,
Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you again, Mr. Perez, Mr. Berry, Mr. Camacho, Ms. Catherine.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice. And just one follow-on question. You know, one of the challenges that certain boards and commissions experience is we get individuals who are appointed and then they're not able to be impaneled with a quorum. So my question to each of you is, do you have the time and the commitment to be able to make towards attending these meetings as scheduled and proceeding with your official business? Can we start with Ms. Catherine?
I can guarantee you I can make the time. I know how to manage my schedule very well. I work full-time. I'm a first-time mom, the Navy-based Guam Ombudsman, and I still manage to make all of these meetings. I haven't missed one yet, so I'll be here.
Thank you, Ms. Catherine. Mr. Camacho?
I'm born on Guam, I live on Guam, I don't intend to move. The nice thing about Guam is everything's accessible, you know, and uniqueness of Guam also is that the community has access to the legislative body, to the executive body, to the judicial body. Yeah, I'll commit to attending all the meetings. I've missed one thus far because I was off island. But with today's technology, we all stay in touch, and I can commit to, you know, I believe it's a monthly meeting, but I understand there'll be more work involved. But since it is part of my daily routine, I will commit to it, and I don't have any issues with not meeting. I'm not in control of my schedule as she is, because I have a wife and I've got other things as a job that demand my attention. But certainly this is an important committee that needs to be given the attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Camacho. Mr. Pangilinan?
Senators, I do intend to attend every meeting. It is my belief that I should never be part of any organization if I cannot participate 100%. So,
Thank you, Mr. Pangilinan. Mr. Berry?
Of course, I'll attend all the meetings that I possibly can, and it's a fun committee in a way. It's very interesting and lots of good questions, and so it always. But yes, I commit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berry, and thank you, Ms. Catherine, Mr. Camacho, Mr. Pangilinan, and Mr. Berry, certainly again for your desire and your interest in serving in this particular building code. Just for the information of the general public, on Monday, May 21st, and then a subsequent notification was disseminated on the 24th with regards to this particular confirmation hearing. Also, one final disclaimer. Mr. Pangilinan is a business associate of a sibling of mine, my sister, so I wanted to make sure that there's a proper acknowledgement of that as we proceed with this particular nomination. Okay, aside from that, thank you again, folks. We look forward to your nomination being presented before the legislative body, possibly by the close of June, the next scheduled legislative session, and then you can proceed with go about your own business with the council. Thank you again. This is responsive. Have a good day, everyone.